big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find out more about them from their website mrvickies.co.uk or by calling 01768 210 102. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to United Group Travel, UK coach holiday firm based in Morpeth. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. They're now taking bookings for 2024. You can call 01670 632 460, 0791 666 4174 or 07957 141 654, or go to the website unitedgrouptravel.com. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button underneath the video today. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video to like it. It does us a big favour. Click share to share to your other social media and let people know about NUFC matters. We're also a podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. If you want to help the show financially, you can take out a £25 one-off membership. You get a scarf, a pen, a cup and a membership card. How do you get it? Go to nufcmatters.com, look for membership. If you've got a smartphone, then put your smartphone over the QR code and it will take you straight to that section on the website. We also support the food bank on this channel. You can donate to the food bank today by going to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. We do support events on this channel as well. If you've got an event, please send it in and we'll promote it. The Tyne Theatre and Opera House are doing a Keegan, Beardsley and Waddle event, the Class of 84, 25th of January 2024. Book now by calling 08 44 249 1000. And the Tyneside Irish Centre, they're doing an event with Frank Clark and John Gibson on Thursday, December the 7th. You can get tickets from nufcmatters.com and they are priced at £15. There's also some tickets available on Groupon. Don't forget, you can catch me 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, with Rye, Dave and Daz on the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show, 7 till 9. And you can catch us on the Red, the Toon and the Cat and on Toon Radio's website. WhatsApp us on the day 0330 043 2002, the perfect way to start your day.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words that make...
Good afternoon. Welcome along to Eddie Howe's press conference review for the game against Crystal Palace, which takes place at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And this was dominated, as everybody would expect, with questions about Sandro Tonali. Matthew Raisbeck from BBC Radio Newcastle, as always, was up first. He basically asked how he was and was he available. And Eddie said he was okay. He is very much with us and he has trained twice. We will analyse him today and, make a decision about his involvement tomorrow. Razor then asked, would he cope with the match day environment and how is he coping at this moment in time? And he said, it's been a very difficult 2 weeks. It's been an emotional 2 weeks, but, underneath, I will have a look. I will see what he's like. But it's a football decision for me. That is the decision that, I am paid to make, and I will make that decision. Razor then asked him about the club statement. And just asked him to maybe go into the club statement and what it meant. And he just said, look, it's his welfare is the most important thing. He's a young player. He's had a lot to take on since he came to Newcastle United. He's moved to a new country. He's moved to a new league. Now this. He says, our first response was to throw our arms around him, to protect him and find solutions for his issues. There's been lots of conversations. There's been big effort on both sides, but he's handled himself well. He's handled himself with respect, and he's handled himself with dignity. He then said, have you got any idea on the future? Suspension length, etc. He just swerved it. Personally, I don't know that. He says, I'll leave that to the people who are dealing with this situation. Razor then moved on. He said, again, the last league game against West Ham, we were without Joe Linton. How is he? He said he's trained well since that game. We've done a lot of work with him. Hopefully, he will be back to the form that we know that he can achieve. But at the moment, he's fit and he is in contention for tomorrow. He then asked him about Isak. He basically said that he hasn't trained since the start of the international break, but we will leave it late to see whether he is fit. I did see Craig Hope going on Twitter basically saying that Isak was unlikely to play, but that isn't what Eddie said in the press conference. Palace, he then asked about Crystal Palace. He said they've got injuries, they've lost Zaha, but what's your feelings about Crystal Palace? He just said, look, Roy's done an incredible job. He brings organisation, he brings structure. He says they've got dangerous players and that can hurt you in transitions. We cannot get distracted by, ins and outs and injuries. We have to focus on the job in hand. As he always says, he always does. Reza then asked him about the break, the international breaks. He says, you've had another one, you've got another one coming. But again, in between, you've got a busy period. And Eddie said, yeah, it's strange. Last year, we used to think that was intense. He says, but this year, it's even more intense. He says, but because we're in all competitions still, this is a different level. We need to find continuity. Hopefully we continue where we left off before the start of this international break. Keith Downey was next. Back onto Tonali again. Did the news come as a surprise about Tonali? He said yes. For everybody at the club, I got a call from Dan Ashworth. I don't know when it was, but it was a total surprise to me. It was a total surprise to him. But in our job, these things happen. And, my immediate thought process was to help the player and to help him get through this. So, great to hear Eddie say that. This has been the big talking point about the press conference. And the reaction from Eddie was exactly as I expected, professional, to the point, thinking of the player first. Is this a new kind of challenge for you? Was Keith's next question, having to deal with something like this? He paused for a little bit of thought and said, yes, I would say so. But thinking back through my career, I don't think I've had to deal with this particular kind of issue. But football is a human. We all have weaknesses. We all have vulnerability. And things like this happen in people's lives. It's how you deal with it as the person and how you deal with it as the club and as the coach. And that is very much the focus of Eddie and the club, getting Tonali through this. Gambling education, is it something which you would like to see encouraged? Is it something you think is probably needed in the game, was Keith's question next. And he said, yes. I mean, it's the kind of thing that we do have in our academy and you see in academies in the UK. We encourage gaining as many good habits as possible. The fact that this happened in Italy, as we know now, and he's not a homegrown player, means that he hasn't had the benefit of that. So, yeah, but Eddie says, yeah, it's something he would like to see, and continue. Is there a concern that AC Milan knew about this, was Keith's question. Good question. It's something we're all asking. I can't comment on that. I've got no idea, said Eddie. He then moved on. He said, Tonali going out, though, but you've got Joe Linton coming in. You've already confirmed that. Joe Willock must be close. He goes, yes, we've got those players coming back over the course of the next few weeks. We've also got players emerging, such as Elliot Anderson, Lewis Miley. They are players who can step up and help. He then moved on about Anthony Gordon. He's had a break. Obviously, he was suspended for the West Ham game. Good to have him back as well. Eddie waxed lyrical about him. Yeah, been magnificent. His game's gone to another level. From the first day of pre-season, he was top of all the fitness charts. He's got a determination to do well. The suspension came as a blow, but he's going to bounce back. He's going to be in contention in contention tomorrow. He's become a dad as well. He highlighted that. Lots of changes in his life. Keith then said, it's an exciting week, though. He said, yes, it's an exciting week, but we're looking at Palace. We're not looking at the week after. This game, this weekend, is hard enough. Andy Sixsmith next. Andy didn't ask a question about Tonali. I thought that was great. He'd had a couple of journalists ask. Well done, Andy. How important has this break been mentally for the players? He goes, it's a balance for me. He says, because rest is a dangerous word. He says, when people think we're resting, he says it gives the impression of chilling out and not doing anything. He says, but that's not what we do. He says, the balance is key, though. Having a couple of days off to chill and not think about football is important for players. He says, but it's a mental load that we've got to be aware of. Andy then asked him about Willock. How is he? How's his recovery going? He'll be chomping at the bit, wanting to get back. And yeah, he just said, look, he says, I'm the same as him. I want him back, but we've got to do things sensibly. But he is getting closer, and he is a huge, huge player for us. Andy then asked about Bruno, because he'd signed the contract in this last international break, as had other players. He asked how, he's seen the video with his dad and Bruno, and he talked about how nice that was, and he just asked how important are those kind of relationships. And he went, those kind of relationships with players and family are very important. And he said, it's those kind of people you turn to when things are going well or things are going badly. They can keep your feet on the ground, or they can give you a boost when you need it. He says, so those kind of relationships are very important, and the relationship that he's got with his dad is lovely. How important is it to keep the players here that have got you where you are? Was a roundabout way that Andy asked his next question, and he said, yeah, it's very important. It's important to keep your best players. It's important to recruit, but recruitment can be difficult. But when you're getting players who want to stay and you're keeping a hold of the nucleus of your side, then that means they're happy, and that means a lot to us. So yeah, it's very important. Andy then mentioned the games last year with Palace were all 0-0 draws. Newcastle, of course, proceeded to beat Palace on penalties in the Carabao Cup at home, of course. He said there were interesting games to us. They might not have been to you guys. He said there were tight games. He says, and it serves us well. We look back on those games, and we learned a lot from them. You've got to earn a win against Crystal Palace, and tomorrow will be no different. Andrew was next from the BBC. Sounded a bit nervous, Andrew, actually, but he's a good lad. Met him a few times myself. He said, he started talking about players that Newcastle have signed, where we're infamous for getting to know players' backgrounds before we sign them. Is this signing of Tonali disappointing because of what's now come out? Eddie just said it's difficult from our side. He's a top person, but he says, like anybody, who really knows everything about everybody that you know, and we don't know everything about everybody in the street, so it's a difficult one from our side. He moved on quickly from that and got himself jumbled up a little bit about Bruno. He's saying he's one booking away from suspension, which is the point he was trying to make. How do you cope with that? Do you try to rein him in, to try and avoid that booking? And he just said, look, likewise with any player, he says, reining him in is not what I would do. He said, I would try to encourage players not to have a meaningless booking. And he says, but there's new rules and new regulations now, which means more bookings. But he says, I certainly wouldn't try and rein a player in and try and change the way that they are, because that takes something away from them. So the answer was no to his question. He asked how Botman was doing. He was very short and sweet with this. He's improving. It's been a good 2 weeks for him. That's all he said, which I would put money on Botman starting tomorrow. Again, the impression we got from some of the social media posts by the journalist was that Botman's not going to play. I don't know whether some of these do this deliberately just to throw Crystal Palace or whoever were playing off the scent. Simon was next from ITV, Simon O'Rourke, asking, is there some kind of counselling being offered at Tonali? He says, yes, we've got measures in place and the process has already started. And then Simon asked a pretty good question, I thought, 50,000 plus there tomorrow. Do you think that they will be behind Tonali because they will see, the human aspect of this? They will see that even Tonali is human. He's not superhuman. He's affected by something that some people in the crowd will have been affected by. And Eddie agreed. He just said, yeah, we are all human. We need to support, we need to educate, and we need to help. Damien was next. He then asked about the close relationship that the club have got with betting partners. And ultimately, Eddie just said, difficult for me to answer. I focus on the football. Damien didn't dwell on it. He moved on. And he asked how important it was to have that kind of welfare role, that pastoral role at the club. And, the stuff that you do with Tonali is going to be important moving forward. He just said, yeah, when players are here, we do all we can to help them. He says, the big thing for me is that the players all know that they can talk to me with impartiality and trust. And he says, I've got that with all my players. And he says, obviously, there'll be some players who you get on better with others, but I've got that trust and impartiality and they know they can talk to me, which is great. Simon Bird was next. He just said, from your point of view, you are rightly supporting your player as the manager. That's you're supporting him and helping. He says, is there an anger at business level from those people at the club who've invested money in him and who now have been embarrassed by this situation and now won't get the opportunity to see him on the football pitch for however long? Eddie paused a bit and thought about it and said, I don't think we can look at it like that. When you sign players, you're signing players to make the club better. He says, I think there's an understanding at business level that we've got to support the player and help them get through this. So the answer was no. There's no anger at business level. If he is banned, will he be looking at signing somebody in that area? Eddie again wouldn't say yes or no to that. He just said, look, we'll make whatever decision is best for the club. Louise Taylor was next. She decided to go back down that Warren hole of the sponsorship, the betting sponsorships, and she says, you're sitting there at a press conference with Funny and 8 in front of you. Should it be removed? Should betting sponsorship be removed from football? And he just said, it's not the decisions that I make. I won't be drawn into it. Then she said, have there been conversations in Saudi? Are the Saudi owners unhappy about this? Has there been any awkward conversations? Shortest answer on his press conference, no. Jordan was next. How has it affected the preparation for tomorrow's game? He went, there's been time spent on lots of phone calls and face-to-face. He says, but my main priority is the team. He says, yes, it's been a challenging couple of weeks, but it hasn't affected the preparation for the game. Have you addressed the squad on this? Was Jordan's next question. I've addressed the squad on football, but I haven't addressed the squad on anything else. I don't address the squad on a player unless it's necessary. He says, but ultimately for me, it's about the football this week, as it always is. He says, and the players have rallied around Sandro this week. He says, which I've been happy to see. Lee Ryder next, and he was talking about the crowd. Can the crowd ignite in a good way behind Tonali? And he went, yes, I hope so. He says, I think that's our wish, that happens. He says, it makes us stronger. It makes us more united. And he says, I do think the crowd will protect him. He says, I know the crowd will support him and they'll show him love. And then Lee went on about Dan Burns' interview after the West Ham game, talking about the fact we conceded a late goal and, is the next step trying to hold on to leads like that and, do what Man City and Liverpool do on regular occasions. And he said, look, the intention was to hold on to the 3 points. He says, but when the goal went in, we could have lost it. He said it's part of our journey and learning curve. And, that based on the second half, we should have won that game, but we didn't. We learn, we move on. It's going to be a tough but an exciting week, said Lee. Eddie agreed. He says it is tough, it's demanding, but it is exciting. He says the team have done unbelievably well after the last international break, and we need to continue that momentum. Luke Edwards was next, said it was a difficult, it is going to be a difficult week, and it's been a difficult press conference. He says, what's Tonali's midterm future and long-term future? He said, there's no difference really. He said, there's different ways to look at this situation. He says, but you've got to remember, he's adapting to a new game. It's intense. He said, there's recent performances. His recent performances have been good. Nothing's changed as far as his career is concerned. I'm sure he'll go on to be an outstanding player. Because he was your big summer signing, is this harder to deal with? Again, Luke's question was answered simply by Eddie. He just says, football's never easy. There's always challenges. This is one of them. And, we just got to navigate it in the way that we do. And he then asked him about Roy Hodgson. He said, Roy's been in the game for such a long time, 76 now, of course. Do you see yourself staying in the game as long as him? He said, no chance, but full credit to him. He does it really well. I am an admirer, but I don't see myself in the game as long as Roy Hodgson. Craig Hope was next. Does Sandro want things turned around quickly? He said, we have discussed deeper issues. We haven't discussed time lengths. He then asked him about Tonali again. He said, when we interviewed him in Milan, he said he felt, the transition from Italy to Newcastle had been difficult. He felt lost at times. Does he want a future at the club? Does the club want him here? Eddie said yes on both sides. And I see him being a part of this team for years. Where does the club stand if he does get suspended? Where does the club stand? Because this hasn't really been on your watch. And it's not fair on you or Newcastle to lose the player if this has happened in Italy. And he basically said, difficult for me to ask. You need to ask Dan or someone else at the club. Will there be legal action? I don't know, said Eddie. Oscar was next. Would you have expected a potential signing, to tell you this might be forthcoming? I don't want to go there, said Eddie. Would you have expected someone to confide in you and tell you about this? He pushed it, Oscar, a bit. Hindsight's a lovely thing, said Eddie. Do you feel let down? I don't deal with those emotions myself, and I concentrate on the football, was Eddie. Give short shrift to Oscar there. Martin basically said, when did you first speak to him? When did you first hear from him? After this news had come out, he said, conversation was on the phone. Says it was quite difficult. And then seeing him face to face, it's been difficult as well for him, but we've helped him deal with things. And, my conversations with him will remain personal. He loves the game, clearly. He must be devastated. And he just said, yes, he is. And our thoughts are with him and his family, and we're going to help him to get through this, as will the team, and we will support him. Has he got his head round a potential ban? Was Martin's last question, and he said it's too early to say. George was up next. Has he expressed regret at what he's done? And again, he just said, look, our conversations are private. It's between me and him. He's a top lad. He's a good character, and we will do everything we can to support him. Dominic was next. With regards to footballers getting banned for betting offences, are lengthy bans the best way to treat somebody like that? He said, I'm not an expert on these things. I don't want to answer that. Dominic then moved on to the head of psychology that's come into the club. Just wanted Eddie's thoughts on that. He said it's part of something that we've been planning for a long time. It's very important to have a head of psychology, not just for the first team, but for the women's team, for the academy, for the staff. And it's something that we've been planning on for a while. So yes, it's very important. Mark Douglas was next. He said, we've heard a lot of speculation about what he has actually supposedly done, Tonali. Has he told you? He said he's told others, but I haven't discussed that with him. We just talk about football. He then basically, he said, look, has it been different for Tonali being the centre of attention and being on the front pages rather than the back? He went, I'm sure it has. He says, I'm sure it has been incredibly difficult for him. He won't want to be on the front pages, but he has to cope with it, and I'm sure he's strong enough to get through it. Mark Douglas then moved on to the supporters. Do you think that if the players do get behind him, that they can use that to the benefit? And he said, yeah. He says, look, the way that he can turn things around is by doing stuff on the pitch. So when he gets on the pitch, and plays to the best of his ability, that in itself should win the supporters round, and they will get behind him. Kieran was next, asking if Tonali had addressed the group about this. No, was his answer. He was very connected and well loved at Milan. How much has the support helped at Newcastle this week? And he just said our actions and, the reaction of the supporters, etc., is going to help them. He said, but actions speak louder than words. And that's very much my mantra. And, I'm sure that, he will see, we've been very supportive of him. Has he got a strong enough character to deal with this? Asked Kieran. And he said, look, he's very quiet. He's quite contained. He's not an extrovert, but he's very determined to do well. And we've seen that. I'd love to think he can handle this. And I see strength in him. Scott was next. He said, I know you're not going to answer the question about, about a lot of these questions about Tonali. He says, but is it fair to say that there's a twin track approach with others looking at the legal side whilst you concentrate on the footballer? Eddie just said, I'm sure that the club are doing what they need to do. My talks are with him are about football. He then asked about Miley. Where are we at with him? Is he any nearer getting into the first team? He said he's got glandular fever. He's resting from that for a couple of weeks, and he'll be training again once he's over that. Probably 4 weeks of lower physical exertion, but he's a real talent. Had he not got glandular fever, would he be there or thereabouts and been in the squad maybe, for tomorrow? And he went, yeah, he has been and he will be. So that is that. That was it then. Hope you're well, Les and Tom. Yes, the weather is wild in England, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. Who does Louise Taylor write for? Found her manner quite respectful. I'm not. Is it the Telegraph or the Guardian? It's one of those two, I think. Les, Telegraph, Guardian, one of those two. But yes, that is it. That is Eddie Howe's press conference. I am back in an hour and 5 minutes time with the three amigos, with Mitch, George, and Steve. Take care. See you soon.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.